I'll bet her, Richard Hawthorne slurred, his manicured hand gripping Grace Williams' wrist as he shoved his black maid toward the poker table like she was another stack of chips. The millionaire's bourbon-soaked laughter echoed through the Diamond Palace casino as he declared, "She's worth more than any of your money. 7 years of perfect service, knows all my secrets, never asks for a raise. Hell, I own her completely." Grace stood frozen at table 7, surrounded by gasping spectators and horrified players, her uniform pressed and pristine despite the chaos erupting around her. Richard's bloodshot eyes gleamed with the arrogance of a man who'd never faced consequences, never been challenged, never imagined that the quiet woman he'd humiliated for years had been planning this exact moment. The casino floor fell deadly silent. Phones appeared, recording everything. Security stepped closer. The other millionaires at the table shifted uncomfortably, but none moved to stop what was happening. Richard Hawthorne had just made the biggest mistake of his privileged life, and Grace Williams was about to make him pay for every racist joke, every dismissive comment, every moment he'd treated her like property instead of a human being. Tonight, the maid was about to become the master. Before we continue, let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow, at the same time, we'll bring you another story of Black people leading the way that you won't want to miss. Grace Williams felt Richard's sweaty palm clamp around her wrist, his grip tightening as he yanked her toward the poker table like she was his property. The pain shot up her arm, but she kept her face blank, professional, the same mask she'd worn for 7 years while this monster paraded her around like a trophy of his power. "Grace here is worth more than any of your chips," Richard continued, his bourbon breath hot against her ear, as he shoved her closer to the table. 7 years of perfect service, knows all my business secrets, never asks for a raise. Hell, I own her completely." The words hit exactly as he intended, like a slap across her face in front of the entire casino. Gasps rippled through the crowd that had gathered around table 7. Phones appeared from purses and pockets, their cameras capturing every second of her humiliation. Security guards stepped closer, unsure how to handle a millionaire treating a human being like livestock. Martinez, the dealer, looked sick. "Mr. Hawthorne, this isn't legal. You can't wager a person. She's my employee," Richard snarled, his grip on Grace's wrist never loosening. "I pay her pathetic salary. I can bet it however I want. Besides, when I win this hand, we'll all laugh about it tomorrow. Won't we, Grace?" David Chen, the tech mogul across the table, pushed back his chair. "This is disgusting, Hawthorne. Even for you." "Disgusting?" Richard's voice rose, drawing more stares from across the casino floor. "She's standing right here. She could object if she wanted to. But she won't, because she knows her place." He turned to Grace with that familiar cruel smile that had haunted her for years. "You don't mind being part of the game, do you, Grace? After all, you're used to serving your betters." The racist undertone wasn't lost on anyone. Grace felt every eye in the casino boring into her, waiting for her reaction. This was the moment she'd been preparing for, the culmination of 7 years of careful planning. Grace Williams met Richard Hawthorne's bloodshot eyes and smiled. "Actually, Mr. Hawthorne," she said quietly, "I do mind." Grace Williams had learned long ago that powerful men revealed their true nature when they thought no one was watching. For 7 years, she'd cleaned Richard's study while he made phone calls, discussing insider trading, tax evasion, and bribes to city officials. She'd organized his files, including the ones he thought were hidden. She'd served drinks to his guests and heard every corrupt conversation, every confession, every crime. Tonight was different, though. Tonight, he'd crossed a line even she hadn't expected. "I object," Grace said quietly, her voice cutting through the casino noise like a blade. Richard spun around, swaying slightly. "What did you say?" "I said I object." Grace stepped forward, her posture straightening. "You can't wager a human being, Mr. Hawthorne. Even your drunk, privileged mind should understand that." Nervous laughter rippled through the gathered crowd. Richard's face flushed red, his humiliation at being challenged by the help in front of his peers igniting his temper. "You work for me," he hissed. "You do what I say, when I say it. Now shut up and let the adults play." Grace pulled out her phone and began recording. "Go ahead, Mr. Hawthorne. Keep talking." I'm sure your shareholders would love to see their CEO attempting to gamble away a human being. Put that away, Richard snarled. Reaching for the phone, Grace stepped back smoothly. Touch me, and I'll have you arrested for assault. The casino's security cameras are already recording everything. Martinez cleared his throat. Perhaps we should call this handoff. No? Interrupted a new voice. A woman approached the table. Her silver hair perfectly styled, her presence commanding immediate attention. I'll cover Mr. Hawthorne's bet. Richard squinted at her. Who the hell are you? Victoria Sterling, she replied, extending a manicured hand. I own this casino. The crowd murmured. Victoria Sterling was legendary in the city, a self-made billionaire who'd built her empire from nothing. She was also, Richard suddenly realized, through his alcoholic haze, black. I'll stake $100,000, Victoria continued, against Mr. Hawthorne's unique wager. But I propose different terms. Richard's greed overrode his caution. What terms? Victoria smiled, and it wasn't entirely pleasant. If you lose, Grace becomes my employee. Same salary, better benefits, and I'll pay her signing bonus of $200,000. If you win, she paused, studying his flushed face. You get my $100,000, plus I'll buy your next round of drinks. The terms seemed too good to be true, which should have been Richard's second warning, but he was too far gone to heed it. Richard's cards were good, a full house, kings over tens. He'd won with worse hands against better players. Victoria Sterling might own the casino, but she was still just another rich woman trying to play in a man's game. He could practically taste victory as he arranged his cards. Before we reveal, Victoria said, settling into the chair across from him, I should mention something interesting. Grace, would you like to tell Mr. Hawthorne about our conversation last week? Richard's head snapped up. What conversation? Grace remained silent, but her slight smile spoke volumes. You see, Richard, may I call you Richard? Grace contacted me 6 months ago. She'd been documenting your activities, the illegal stock trades, the bribes to city council members, the tax evasion schemes. Quite a comprehensive collection, actually. The blood drained from Richard's face. That's impossible. She's just a housekeeper. Grace has a master's degree in business administration from Northwestern. Victoria continued conversationally. She also has a law degree from Columbia. She took the housekeeping job specifically to get close to you. Richard's hands began to shake. You're lying. Am I? Victoria gestured to Grace. Would you like to tell him about the federal investigation? Grace finally spoke, her voice steady and professional. The FBI has been building a case against you for 18 months, Mr. Hawthorne. I've been their inside source, providing documentation of your criminal activities. They're planning to arrest you Monday morning. This is insane, Richard stammered, looking around the table for support. The other players watched in fascination, their own cards forgotten. The only reason they haven't moved yet, Grace continued, is because they wanted to see how deep your corruption goes. Tonight's little stunt attempting to wager a human being, that's the kind of behavior that will make headlines. The kind that ensures even your expensive lawyers can't spin this as a misunderstanding. Richard lunged for his phone, but Chen grabbed his wrist. I wouldn't, if I were you. Making threats isn't gonna help your case. Case? Richard's voice cracked. What case? This is entrapment. Victoria laughed, a sound like crystal breaking. Entrapment would be if we convinced you to commit crimes. You've been committing them for years. Grace just documented them. Now, she continued, straightening her cards, shall we see who wins this hand? Richard stared at his full house, but the cards seemed to blur before his eyes. Everything was crumbling, his freedom, his fortune, his future. And it was all because of the woman he'd treated like furniture for 7 years. Richard's full house had seemed unbeatable moments ago. Now, as he watched Victoria arrange her cards with practiced precision, doubt crept in like poison. The casino's noise faded to a distant hum, and all he could hear was his own ragged breathing. You know what I find fascinating about people like you, Richard? Victoria said, not looking up from her cards. You think intelligence is tied to social status. You assumed Grace was unintelligent because she cleaned your toilets. You never bothered to have a real conversation with her. Shut up and show your cards, Richard croaked. If you'd talked to her, you might have learned that she graduated summa cum laude from Northwestern, that she speaks 4 languages, that she turned down a position at Goldman Sachs to work for the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. Grace stepped forward. I volunteered for this assignment, Mr. Hawthorne. When the Bureau learned about your connections to the Meridian money laundering scheme, they needed someone who could get close to you. Someone you'd never suspect. The perfect invisible woman, Victoria added. A black domestic worker in a rich white man's house. You literally looked right through her for years. Richard's vision blurred. The Meridian scheme was supposed to be bulletproof. A complex web of offshore accounts and shell companies that had funneled $40 million through his pharmaceutical company. If the FBI knew about it, how long, he whispered. How long what? Grace asked. How long have you been recording me? Grace reached into her purse and pulled out a small device, no bigger than a button. Every conversation, every phone call, every meeting in your study. 7 years of evidence, Mr. Hawthorne. 7 years of you incriminating yourself while I dusted your shelves. The tech mogul whistled low. $40 million, you said. That's serious federal time. 25 to life, Victoria confirmed. Especially with the conspiracy charges they're adding. Money laundering, tax evasion, bribing federal officials, conspiracy to commit fraud. It's quite a list. Richard tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't support him. This is revenge. Because of what I said tonight. Tonight was just the final straw, Grace replied. Do you know how many times you've humiliated me? How many dinner parties where you introduced me as just the help? How many times you've made racist jokes, thinking I'd just smile and take it because I needed the job? I never meant. You meant every word. Grace's voice was ice. You meant it when you told your friends that black people were naturally suited for service work. You meant it when you said I should be grateful for the opportunity to work for someone like you. You meant it when you wagered me like property tonight. Richard's hands shook as he reached for his cards. I still have a good hand. I can still win this. Victoria's smile was sharp as a knife. Can you? The moment stretched like a taut wire. Richard clutched his cards. Kings over tens. A hand that would win most pots. But Victoria's confidence was unnerving. And Grace's revelations had shattered his world. Everything he'd built, everything he'd stolen, was crumbling around him. You're bluffing, he said, trying to inject conviction into his voice. All of this, the FBI, the evidence, the investigation, you're trying to psyche me out. Victoria tilted her head. Am I? Grace, would you mind sharing one of our recordings with Mr. Hawthorne? Grace tapped her phone, and suddenly Richard's voice filled the air. Tell Senator Morrison that if he doesn't kill that banking regulation bill, we'll cut off campaign contributions. And remind him we have photos from that weekend in Miami. The ones with the 16-year-old. Richard's face went white. Turn it off. The Cayman account is clean. Transfer another $5 million through the shell company. Make sure it looks like consulting fees. The IRS is too stupid to trace it. Turn it off. Grace stopped the recording. The casino had gone completely silent. Even the slot machines seemed to have quieted in the face of what they'd just heard. That was from last Tuesday, Grace said calmly. I have hundreds of hours like that. Every crime, every bribe, every threat. All recorded with federal court-approved surveillance equipment. Richard's breathing came in short gasps. You can't use that. It's inadmissible. I didn't consent to being recorded. Actually, a new voice said, in this state, only one party needs to consent to recording a conversation. Grace consented on behalf of the federal government. Everyone turned to see a tall man in a dark suit approaching the table. He flashed a badge. Agent Marcus Webb, FBI. Mr. Hawthorne, we've been waiting for you to finish your game. Richard's cards fell from his trembling fingers. No. This isn't happening. Oh, it's happening, Agent Webb said. We've been building this case for 2 years. Grace's evidence is just the cherry on top. We already have your banking records, your communications with Senator Morrison, and testimony from 3 of your co-conspirators who decided to cooperate rather than face life sentences. Victoria leaned back in her chair. I should mention, I'm not just a casino owner, Richard. I also sit on the board of the FBI's Financial Crimes Advisory Committee. When Grace brought me her evidence 6 months ago, I helped coordinate this operation. Richard looked around the table desperately. This is entrapment. You set me up. We gave you every opportunity to be a decent human being, Grace said quietly. 7 years of opportunities. Tonight, when you tried to wager me like livestock, you showed everyone exactly who you are. Agent Webb pulled out handcuffs. Richard Hawthorne, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit money laundering, tax evasion, bribery of federal officials, and about 15 other charges I don't have time to list right now. Wait, Richard gasped. The hand? We haven't finished the hand. Victoria smiled and flipped her cards. Royal flush, hearts. Richard stared at the cards in disbelief, then at his own scattered hand on the table. Even if he'd won, he'd already lost everything. As Agent Webb clicked the handcuffs around Richard's wrists, the full weight of his situation crashed down on him. The casino's security cameras had recorded everything. His attempt to wager Grace, his racist comments, his complete breakdown when confronted with evidence of his crimes. By morning, the footage would be on every news channel in the country. My lawyers, Richard mumbled. I need to call my lawyers. Your lawyers are busy, Agent Webb said, leading him toward the casino's exit. 3 of them were arrested this morning as co-conspirators. The rest are trying to distance themselves from your case as fast as possible. The crowd parted as they walked through the casino. Phones were out, recording everything. Richard could already imagine the headlines: Millionaire arrested after trying to bet black employee at casino. His humiliation was complete and public. The beautiful thing about this case, Grace said, walking beside them, is that you did most of our work for us. You kept meticulous records of every crime filed away in your study like trophies. You never imagined the woman cleaning around those files might be reading them. Why? Richard asked, his voice breaking. Why go through all this? Why not just have me arrested years ago? Because we needed to understand the full scope of your operation, Grace replied. Your money laundering scheme involved 12 other executives, 4 senators, and 2 federal judges. We needed time to build cases against all of them. Victoria fell into step beside them. As of tonight, federal agents are executing warrants in 6 states. Your entire network is being dismantled. Richard stumbled, his legs weak. My family, my wife, my children. They'll lose everything. Your wife filed for divorce this morning, Agent Webb said matter-of-factly. She's claiming she knew nothing about your illegal activities. Smart woman. Her lawyer already worked out a deal to keep the house and legitimate assets. As for your children, Grace added, they're adults, they'll survive. Unlike the pensioners who lost their retirement savings when you embezzled from the employee pension fund. They reached the casino's main entrance. Outside, Richard could see federal vehicles, their lights flashing red and blue against the night sky. News vans were already arriving. Reporters scrambling to get the story. The pension fund? Richard's voice was barely a whisper. $47 million, Grace said, stolen over 5 years to fund your lifestyle. Those people worked their entire lives, and you took their security to buy yachts and vacation homes. Richard's knees buckled. Agent Webb caught him, keeping him upright as they walked toward the waiting vehicles. That's why I took this assignment. Grace continued. My grandfather worked for your company for 30 years. He died broke because his pension was gone. You stole his dignity, his security, his peace of mind in his final years. The full circle of justice was complete. Richard had destroyed lives without thought or remorse, and now his own world was collapsing around him. But there was one more twist waiting for him. As the federal vehicle pulled away from the Diamond Palace Casino, Richard slumped in the back seat, his designer suit wrinkled and stained with sweat. Through the window, he watched reporters interviewing Victoria Sterling and Grace Williams, both women standing tall under the bright camera lights. There's something else you should know, Agent Webb said from the front seat. The civil forfeiture case against your assets, that's going to be handled by a very special prosecutor. Richard barely looked up. Who? Webb smiled in the rearview mirror. Grace Williams. Turns out she's not just FBI, she's also a licensed attorney in this state. She'll be personally handling the seizure of your illegally obtained wealth. The news hit Richard like a physical blow. Everything, his mansion, his cars, his art collection, his offshore accounts, would be handled by the woman he'd treated as property for 7 years. The pension fund will be restored, Webb continued. Every penny, plus interest. The families you destroyed will get their security back. And Grace will make sure of it. Back at the casino, Grace stood before the cameras with quiet dignity. A reporter thrust a microphone toward her. Ms. Williams, how does it feel to bring down one of the city's most powerful men? Grace considered the question carefully. It feels like justice. For 7 years, I watched Richard Hawthorne destroy lives without consequence. He believed his wealth and status made him untouchable. Tonight, he learned that no one is above the law. What was it like working undercover for so long? Difficult, Grace admitted. Every day, I had to smile while he treated me as less than human. I had to bite my tongue when he made racist jokes or dismissed my intelligence. But I knew that every insult, every humiliation was bringing us closer to this moment. Victoria Sterling stepped forward. Grace's courage and dedication have exposed a corruption network that extends far beyond one man. Her work will have ripple effects for years to come. Ms. Williams, another reporter called out. What's next for you? Grace smiled, the first genuine smile she'd allowed herself in years. I'm returning to my real job with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. And I'm starting a foundation to help families affected by corporate fraud. We're calling it the Invisible Workers Foundation, for all the people who are overlooked, but see everything. As the interviews concluded, and the cameras were packed away, Victoria and Grace found themselves alone in the quiet casino. How does it feel? Victoria asked. Really? Grace looked out the window at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Richard Hawthorne was beginning to understand what it meant to be powerless. Somewhere else, pensioners would sleep better knowing their stolen money was coming home. It feels like the beginning, Grace said. He thought he could bet me like property. Instead, he bet everything and lost it all. The two women walked toward the exit together, their heels clicking on the marble floor. Behind them, the poker table where it all happened sat empty, its cards scattered and forgotten. But the game was far from over. Federal prosecutors would spend months unraveling Richard's criminal network. Grace would work tirelessly to return stolen money to its rightful owners. And across the country, other invisible workers, housekeepers, gardeners, drivers, assistants, would take note of what had happened at the Diamond Palace Casino. Sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one everyone assumes has no power at all. And sometimes, the biggest bet a person can make is underestimating the quiet woman in the corner who's been watching, listening, and remembering everything. Richard Hawthorne thought he was betting his maid. Instead, he was betting his entire life, and Grace Williams was holding all the winning cards.